Hello, this is Paul Hill with Utah State University Extension, and I would like to thank you for joining us with this uh, kind of impromptu presentation. It's lessons learned from a 30-year career in Extension. I wanted to introduce the person I'll be interviewing today, who is my region director, Kristine Saunders, and this is her last week as an Extension professional. And so she will be retiring, and I thought it would just be a horrible thing to do to not recognize her and interview her and ask her some important questions for Extension professionals who are new and or onboarding in Extension. And so I wanted to welcome Chris to this Google Hangout on Air. It'll be recorded and it'll be up on learn.extension.org. So you can get the archive of it. And so I'd like to thank Chris for being here, and I would like to kind of start off with asking her to kind of tell us about her education, her background a little bit, and really kind of how she got introduced to Extension, why she chose Extension as a career, and really how it's changed over the last 30 years.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this broadcast today. You know, since you invited me, I have been really taking time to reflect on my career. And I grew up in a small town in Wyoming and came to Utah State University as a student. I majored in nutrition, and I ultimately got a master's degree in foods and nutrition. And I was familiar with Extension through 4-H because as a child I was a 4-H member, so I knew 4-H as a young person. And then, as it would happen, there was the Extension nutrition specialist at USU had her time bought out for a couple of years by USDA, and they needed someone half-time to be the nutrition specialist for Extension. So I took over that post, and I functioned in that post for about 5 years. But because it was half-time, it was not really counted as part of my regular 30 years. So actually I've been with Extension for 30 plus years. So in my time, as I've reflected, I spent the first 5 years as a nutrition specialist, and then a position in a county office downtown became open. And so I was in the county office for about 13 years. And then I had the opportunity to write the first food stamp nutrition proposal for the state, which I did, and I worked with that as a PI on that proposal and moved back on campus, and I was there for about 7 years, and then I applied for this position as a region director and I've been in this position for about 11 years. I'm just closing out my 11th year. So as I've reflected, Extension has a lot of avenues that you can pursue and choose. And I think that's what's made it interesting for me is I have been allowed to pursue some different interests. The time as a specialist was important. The time in the county was important. The time as a grant PI on campus again was important. Then my time as a region director working directly with the 17 counties that I had been assigned in the southern region of Utah. That I don't know, is there anything else you would like to know about my experience?
Well, taking a step back and looking kind of at Extension over that period of time, from when you started as just in halftime in that post, how has Extension changed to where you are now as a region director? How has the structure changed? How have some of the jobs changed? Kind of thinking about all the people you've hired, when you're writing these job descriptions, what kind of things about Extension have changed, as an organization, but also, for employees and professionals?
I think Extension it's like any other organization. If you don't evolve, you become extinct. And Extension over time has evolved, and I think we're in an important transition phase right now. When I started as an Extension specialist, Extension in the county was pretty much specialist driven. There were program leaders for each specific discipline. So Family and Consumer Sciences had a program leader, Ag and Natural Resources had a program leader, Community Development had a program leader. So there were a lot more leadership figures that were housed on campus than there are now. And people in the county pretty much took direction from the interests and the specialties that the specialists were putting forward. And so you didn't have as much autonomy as you have now. Another thing that Extension used to do is monthly, we used to have what we called electronic staff meetings, which everybody had their black box in their county, and every month from a staff meeting would originate on campus, and we would receive an updated information monthly as if it were a staff meeting, but it was electronically driven. And Extension at that point in time always had the latest bells and whistles. Extension was really on the cutting edge and on the riding the front of the wave as far as technology and new developments happened. And then the economy kind of tanked, and as people retired, and especially on campus, specialists, new people were not hired to take their place, and then the needs within the state kind of changed, and so they didn't need as many specialists in some particular areas that they had in the past. And at that point, specialists were, instead of being kind of in the Department of Extension, they were put in on-campus departments, which perhaps the departments were not as familiar with Extension statewide as they could have been. And so Extension's role became more directed by departments and what was perceived as needs by departments. And then, of course, the reason that was done is so specialists it was easier for them to become successful in the promotion and tenure system. And then when that started happening, Extension in the counties became a little bit less, or a little bit more lost in the crowd, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But the possibilities for an Extension professional housed in a county has really opened up. You have the opportunity to specialize and to follow your passions and meet the needs within your county as is directed and by the way you want to go. So things have changed over time. We no longer have program leaders. Middle management positions are disappearing, and as the needs of the state and the counties change, we will probably see more changes coming in the future. And also, as younger and younger people are hired, their expertise and their view of the world is a little bit different than people who are at retirement age like myself.
So I have to ask, what exactly is a black box?
That's what we just called it. I have no idea what it was. It was some sort of electronic thing. It was just a black box with microphones in it, and I don't even know how we connected statewide using the black box, but we did that. And then for a while we had satellite that classes were presented to the people out in the state from campus specialists using satellite education. And that worked for a while until it was discovered that people really weren't attending because the classes were offered at odd times, and yeah, and not well advertised. I don't know. There were a bunch of missteps along the way, but I just see extension in Utah becoming less and less centralized than it was in times past.
Yeah. So, kind of looking ahead over the next, the next 30 years, how must extension change in order to stay relevant? You touched on, looking at, following the needs of the state, and kind of, things change based on what the needs of the state are and our clientele. But how else should extension change?
Yeah, I think the reality of the situation is extension as a whole is not going to get any more money than we have now. And so it's going to become more vital that we start looking at ways to charge for what we do, and not necessarily in a profit mode, but as maybe cost recovery. Cost recovery is going to have to be considered a lot more. I think education offered through online classes that people can access at their own leisure, their own time, and their own interests. If I'm awake at 3 in the morning and that's the best time for me to do a little education, I think extension needs to follow that. And then we need to look at the way people learn and the way people access information. Used to be that extension was one of the primary sources of knowledge, and people would call. As a matter of fact, when I was in the county during canning season, I would spend literally a month, all day, every day, on the phone. And that's how I got into massage, because after talking on the phone for so long, your muscles tighten up. But there are so many excellent online sources now that that counties are driving people to websites for more specific information. And I think in larger, more urban counties, they still receive quite a few calls, but we don't necessarily receive as many calls as we used to. I think Google is the great information provider, and if you have a question, you just Google it. And so it's going to behoove extension to be one of the prime Google sources that people are referred to for information.
So, what would you say is probably one of the top issues facing extension today? Something that we as a system need to address. Something that you've noticed over in the last few years.
I think we're getting better than we used to be, but that was a question that was asked me when I interviewed for the job as the Southern Region Director, is what is the biggest extension issue? And that issue, in my mind, is accountability. And we need to be much more accountable to the public that we serve, and our administrators and government officials and all of those key individuals that can help promote extension now and into the future. So we need to plan for impact in the activities and events that we do. With the people that I have worked in extension, that's one of the things I have really noticed, is that we put together outstanding and excellent programs and activities and events, but we fail to really articulate why we're doing these. What do we hope people will gain from taking this class, and evaluating to see if people actually did obtain the information that we set out to deliver, and then communicate those as impacts. I mean, we need to know the so what. So what? Why are you doing this program? Why did you do it in the first place? And what did our clientele gain as a result of doing that? So I think accountability to well, ourselves too, and as part of promotion and tenure system and county commissioners and administration on campus, we just need to better demonstrate why we are still important and relevant in the world and the people we serve.
Thank you. That's great. Shifting gears a little bit, you do work quite a bit with new faculty, and so, or just extension educators, new extension professionals in the system in Utah. And so I was wondering, what advice would you give them? Someone who just started, maybe at an interview that's exploring this idea of working in extension, maybe has just started, maybe kind of feeling a little overwhelmed. What would you say to them? What kind of advice would you provide?
Well, the first thing is to communicate to a new employee that extension is overwhelming. And if you try and learn everything there is to know about extension in the first week, the first month, even the first year, you're setting yourself to a very, very difficult task. You need to learn about what's important in extension, but also realize that most people who are hired as tenure track employees, it will take at least the first 3 years before you really figure out extension. You'll figure out the needs and issues in the county and the people that you serve, and start developing some activities and events under program umbrellas to address those. And so don't get really concerned over not understanding everything and making some mistakes to start out with, and give yourself some time. Also, I think it's important to, one of our new hires recently put it in a very tangible way. He said, from what I hear you saying, it's important to find your niche and find where you fit. In the past, we were expected to be everything to everybody. As a matter of fact, when I was hired as a employee in the county, I was told extension is a 24-hour-a-day job. And so don't expect to just work 8 hours a day. The job is your life. And people of my generation and my age, we bought into that to a large extent. And I really do encourage new hires. For the first little while, the important thing is just to show up at meetings of local organizations. Just show up and get your name out there so people recognize your face, shake their hands, become acquainted, and just figure out where you fit and where you can make the most difference in their life. But also, you have to keep in mind that if you are married and have a family, that they are important too. And so you have to figure out how to set boundaries and how to set limits. That was one of the mistakes I made when I first started working. I worked almost every single night of the week. I worked most weekends, and I worked holidays until finally, after I'd been in the county for probably about 8 years, it dawned on me I got just as much credit from working fewer hours as I did from working more hours. And I don't know who I was trying to impress, but what we recently lost an employee because they said, as my name has gotten out there and I've become more recognized, people are demanding more of my time. And I need to pull back, and I need to focus more time on my husband and my family, and I'm interested in having more children. And so setting priorities and there are some things through your extension position that you absolutely need to do, but you will learn over time that you have to make choices. You have to make choices, and that's always the hardest thing to do, is when you have choices between two good things, which one is the best and which one you want to do the most. And that somewhat depends on where you are in your career. If you have hired on as tenure track faculty, those first 3 years are critical, and then the next 3 years are more critical to flesh out and build on the foundation that you've built in those first 3 years. But saying that, you also need to set some priorities, and your family needs to be one of those priorities. And that's probably some of the best information I can give you. But finding your niche and understanding and saying it's okay to not do it all. You can't do it all. And I think in the future we may be heading towards more specialization within county personnel, so that you don't have to do it all, that somebody in a neighboring county, or through electronic means, or through actually visiting the county, can help you out with those issues and events, which I think will be a good thing.
Yeah, I think that allowing for specialization would definitely, one of the questions I was want to talk about, which you already hit, was how to avoid burnout. And so allowing for more specialization, and of course, taking the time you need to recharge, especially during the holidays, is a good way to avoid burnout. So can you explain and kind of tell us how you paced yourself? So you had several different positions in your 30-year career. Can you tell us how you paced yourself over that time? Were those changes what you needed at the time? And then also, do you see extension professionals staying in extension for 30 years? And talk to us a little bit about the turnover rates in extension you've seen.
It's interesting that you asked that question, because I was just talking with someone in an administrative role fairly recently, and he made the comment, we get tired of doing the same thing all the time, and we need to look for changes or specialization or different opportunities. I think on campus, that's why people take sabbaticals, is so that you can renew and refresh. And it's not unheard of for extension in the counties to take sabbaticals too, which I don't think it happens very often, but I would encourage people to maybe look at and consider that. For myself, it was kind of interesting for me to review my own career and look at the changes that I have made and the opportunities that I've had through extension over the years. And it seems like on an average of about every 7 to 10 years, I've made some kind of change. And I think if you're not changing and moving forward, you become kind of stale. And that, I think, when burnout happens, I think there's two different modes of burnout. And I call one burnout and one burn up. Burnout, I think, is just when you just have done the same things for so long that you're just tired of it. You need something else. Burn up, I think, is when you just take on too much. And I have experienced both of those syndromes, and I can tell you that finding a balance is a much better way to do it. But also looking for different opportunities, and there will come opportunities in your career. Like I took I took the opportunity to move to the county when I did. I took the opportunity to move back on campus when I did and work with grant proposal. I took the opportunity to become a weld intern. I took the opportunity to apply for and get the job as a region director. So look around for opportunities that will come your way. And if there's something that you're interested in doing, pursue it. Sometimes things don't always work out the way you want them to, but if you don't take the risk, you're not going to get the reward either. So, and you know, it's interesting characteristic, especially of county-based faculty, that most people are somewhat risk averse. Our major role, or one of our major roles as extension in the counties, is to be change agents. But if you look at people, we are so resistant to change that it is kind of interesting to note that we're change agents who are resistant to change. But if we don't change, we will become extinct. Change and grow and develop and pursue advanced education, pursue professional development opportunities. It's interesting if you talk to people in business. Business people will tell you that they want to be the second, not the first. They will allow another company to put their neck out there and take the initial risk, and then you see them all coming on board, like Wendy's did with their dollar menu. They did that for about a year, and then you look around, all the other fast food places took the plunge also. And that's an interesting aspect of human nature, is there are not all of us who are willing to be on the leading edge or the front lines and try something new that we might fail at. If somebody else will take that lead and take all of the risk, and we are more than willing to fall in behind. I think in the future, we're going to have to look in our crystal balls a little bit more and step out there, take that risk. It's okay to take the risk and not have it work out, but if it does work out, you're in for great reward. So be a risk taker is something that I would recommend.
That's definitely something that you've shared with me many times, and it's something I've taken to heart. So I appreciate your words on that. Tell me about something that, you know, being in your region. There's something that you hear, kind of this running theme of elevator, your elevator speech, and can you tell us about your push for that, why it's necessary, and what you've learned about your elevator. I think it's elevator pitch.
Yeah. I have really tried to encourage people to look at and understand and identify what it is they do for the clientele they serve. Over the years, I think people have become lost in trying to explain what extension is and what extension does, which at some point is important, but the person that you are working with in your county, you know, that may be interesting, but then it's the big whoop. So what they want to know is what you do for them. And encouraging people to look at their purpose for being in the county, the educational activities and events that they promote, the curricula they develop, the fact sheets they write, where their interests and passion lie. It's hard for people to commit to why it is that they do what they do. There have been some people who've been more successful at that than others. I think in the promotion and tenure system, instead of saying what's your elevator speech, they're saying what's your extension philosophy, because the extension at the land grant is teaching, research, and extension. So for people with a major teaching assignment, they're wanting to know your teaching philosophy, your research philosophy, and your extension philosophy. Why is it that you do what you do within the extension umbrella? It's been really interesting. The people, I think, who have identified their reason for being or what they do for people, it has given new meaning for their work, new direction. The family and consumer science faculty that I work with, many of them have identified family resiliency and just the idea of building a resilient population. Among the ag community, sustainability and profitability have turned out to be some of their purposes for being. So I really, really, really do encourage people to focus on what it is that you do and why what you do is important. And the whole thing about the elevator speech is just an introductory thing. When you meet people for the first time, you typically don't spend hours with them talking about your programs. But if you meet them in an elevator for the 20 seconds that takes you to go from the ground floor to the 20th floor, you can tell a person in that amount of time. Give them a little teaser about what it is you do and why it's important. I really do maintain that being able to identify that role that you play and why it's important is an important aspect of your extension career.
Thanks. So this is kind of almost like a selfish question. Starting out in extension, there's all these associations, and I'm learning about new ones all the time. Can you tell me about your experience with associations? Which ones have been beneficial? Maybe which ones haven't been, and why? And just advice you have for new faculty, extension professionals who are kind of figuring things out in the beginning. I've found some associations that I was like, man, I wish I knew about these earlier. And then others who I've always, paid my dues and gone to the meetings, and I can't really pinpoint where they've helped me. And so I'm just wondering if you could share a word about associations. I mean, it's kind of really, you get out what you put in, but tell us about what's been beneficial for you and how you've made it worth your time.
Since I've been in this position, I've done a lot of reading and research about what makes successful early career faculty and employees. And one of the biggest deterrents to success in faculty is the feeling of isolation. And small rural counties in Utah, sometimes we only have one FCS person and one ag person, and in some counties there's just one person, period. And working in isolation is really hard, because who do you bounce ideas off? Who do you make plans and preparations with? Becoming involved in associations is one way to develop a network of professionals with whom you can work. I always recommend that to start out with, because there are a lot of things you can become involved in, and for the most part, counties would only pay for membership in one professional organization, so that's been somewhat a limiting factor. But to join the Utah and the National Extension Association for Family and Consumer Sciences, and then the Ag Agent Association, those are two, I think, to start out with and begin with, and that's just to meet people who are in the same position you are, and offer some professional development along those lines, that's always a place to begin. And like you said, if need to become involved in the organization. For a lot of years in Utah, the professional organizations, you have all these committees, and you sign up to be on a committee or a committee chair, and then throughout the year, the committee doesn't really do anything. You have to become involved in those organizations and those committees to find out if they're a good fit for you first, to meet people and make acquaintances and take part in professional development that may be offered. And then people like you who are very curious about what else is out there, you can find other organizations that may fit your need a little bit better. People who are a little bit more like-minded and who are going in the same direction that you are. But I think professional organizations are important. They are our clientele in some ways, and our colleagues are our clientele too. And it gives an important place where people can share with each other what you're doing and what works in counties, because you always go to those professional meetings and you come home and you say, oh, I really want to try this, or I really want to try that. Yeah, and then the reality hits and you're enmeshed in what you were doing, and yeah, just learning how to stop doing something that you've been doing for a long time to be able to pick up something else, I think, is an important part of the learning.
Yeah. So to wrap it up, do you have some stories you'd like to share of ways that you've learned, maybe by making mistakes, maybe some classic mistakes, or ways you've screwed up, or something along that line? What are some great stories you have that you just cherish?
Extension is full of stories, and I know people who have always been going to write books about some of the extension questions that you get. As far as my personality is a very direct personality. I confront a situation or a conflict in a more direct manner, and maybe it would have been better to learn to be a little bit more diplomatic, but that's really not my personality. And my thinking ahead of myself has sometimes gotten me into huge trouble. One thing I can remember is back in the early days when I was in the county, it's when at the federal level, there was a movement, because extension has always been really scattered in the kind of programs and activities and events that you do, and there didn't seem to be any continuity to those programs. And Utah was one of the last states, I think, to look at and accept the federal initiatives as they came down. But those initiatives, I think, were a really good way of starting to target what you do and create a better understanding and set up for impact than the old way used to be. At annual conference, I got up one time and tried to push that agenda. Not a good thing to do. really not a good thing to do. But I learned from that experience, and I took from that experience what I needed to know, which was the importance of having an umbrella program that is more specific or more descriptive than just agriculture or just family and consumer sciences. And from each of those faux pas or mistakes or risks that you take, if you can go back and look at the lessons learned that can maybe make what you're doing better, I think that's what I really recommend for people to do. Yeah, don't be afraid of the mistake, because we all make them. But it's the lessons learned from the mistakes that are important.
Well, I thank you for sharing that with us. Anything else you'd like to share before we wrap it up?
Extension is a great organization. I think we have a great future. What I have learned from being a region director and responsible for 17 counties in Utah, which only has 29 counties, is each state is different, and you can try something that works in one state and it may or may not work in another state. But in Utah, that has 29 counties, we have different issues and different way of working than in a state that has 102 counties. We have a lot of distance and a lot of territory to cover. But I think learning where your focus is, learning your elevator speech that defines your niche in what you do, and also looking at scholarship and written scholarship as a way of communicating what you do with really the outside world, colleagues as well as clients. So thank you, Paul, for this opportunity. I wish you all the best. I think you have an amazing career ahead of you, and it's been a pleasure working with you in the past 5 years.
Thank you, Chris. Just to everybody who will be watching this later and now, I just want to express my appreciation to Chris. I've been in Extension now for 5 years, and I think that Chris has made a huge impact in my life, my personal life, and I've always looked forward to the times we have to meet and the wisdom that she's given me. And so this is kind of just a parting, I guess, a gift, or just wanted to kind of give her one last. I'm sure she'll probably start Twitter here in a little bit and be able to start tweeting out her tidbits of wisdom. So I'll be retweeting those. But I just wanted to have this open discussion and ask these questions for myself, and then also for my colleagues in Extension. I think it's important to work out loud and to share. To share what we learn, and Chris has certainly learned a lot over her career, and I just appreciate her sharing that with us and with me. And so thank you, Chris. I plan to stay in touch, so when you get that Gmail account set up, let's stay in touch and send some Christmas cards, and I'll help you get on Twitter, and we'll look for opportunities to continue to work together, and I definitely want to follow you and learn about all your different adventures in retirement life. So thanks again, and I just want to tell everyone thanks for joining us, and have a wonderful new year.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year. Take care, everybody.